Sa video na ito ay titignan natin ang common functional groups at i-identify natin ang iba't ibang organic functional groups. So ano ang functional group? Sa organic chemistry, makakita ka ng maraming molecules na binubuo ng mga carbon at hydrogen. You can get many complex structures and many isomers from just carbon and hydrogens. Bago maging reactive ang mga molecules na ito, ay may posibilidad na magkaroon ng iba pang mga atom na may iba't ibang electronegativities, different electrons, concentrations, and pi bonds. Those specific groups, those are your functional groups. Now, before we go into functional groups, I want to talk about one type of group that you'll see that not functional group at all, and that's the R group. Habang tinitignan mo ang iyong screen, you'll see molecules na mayroong mga carbons, oxygens, nitrogens, at an R group. Ngunit ang isang group ng R ay hindi nagre-represent ng specific collection of atoms. Instead, the R group ay nagsasabi sa iyo kung ano ang mayroon ka sa natitirang bahagi ng molecules. For example, if I'm looking at the structure here, but then, meron akong isang complex group of C double bond O, single bond to another C na may tatlong hydrogen, and I specifically want to focus on this portion of the molecule. So instead of reading this entire molecule and the group that I box off, I'll turn the entire black portion in the R for the rest of the molecule, and then simply focus on the ester dito sa isang CO2, CH3. R is the rest of molecule. We'll typically see R functional group upang ipakita na maaari itong lumabas sa anumang uri ng molecule. May nababanggit na ester kanina. Ang ester is a compound most often formed by the consideration of an alcohol and an acid with elimination of water. It contains the functional group C double bond O, C double bond O, joined via carbon to another oxygen atom. Ang ether naman is a compound containing an oxygen atom bonded to two hydrocarbon groups. Next, let's identify the different functional groups using the 8 most commonly prescribed drugs from 2019. Before we jump into the problems, let's quickly look at the 4 frequency computed pair of functional groups. Kaya sa itaas na kaliwa ay mayroon tayong molecule dito. It contains an OH group, and so student will say, "Oh, this is an alcohol." At tama iyon. At ang molecule sa right, it also has an OH group, kaya madaling tingnan ang structure on the right and say, "That is an alcohol." It's not, because it has right next door a carbonyl. This collective functional group, the carbonyl plus the OH, ay may special na pangalan. Ito ay tinatawag na carboxylic acid. So don't just look at the pieces, but try to identify what the largest whole is to contain those different pieces. To the bottom left, we have this functional group. Ito ay dalawang grupo na konektado sa isang oxygen. Ito ay isang ether. Ngunit sa kanan, meron tayong parehong uri ng situation. One of the groups next to the ether oxygen is now a carbonyl. In that specific case, this is no longer just an ether. It is an ester. So again, we don't want to break it a functional group down into too small of a part because we will miss the larger story of all those parts together. So that's the ether versus the ester. In the upper right, we have an alcohol. Nakita na natin ito. At narito ang isang case kung saan ang alcohols attached to the 6-membered ring na tinatawag nating benzene ring. Ito ay madalas ding tinatawag na alcohol, but some people, and you have to go by the lead of your structure here, they might call this by a slightly different name. They might call it a phenol or a phenolic alcohol. At binibigyan natin ito ng ibang pangalan because that OH behaves a little bit differently. It reacts differently. And because it reacts differently, we give it a different name. Kaya meron isang alcohol and then phenolic alcohols or phenols. Now, finally, in the bottom right is a compound that has a nitrogen in it. Maraming nitrogen na naglalaman ng mga compound. Tinatawag na amine ang functional group na yon. But amines have the same thing as alcohols. If you have a carbon next to the amine, di na ito anamine. It is called an amide. Yan ang tinatawag sa United States. At sa tingin ko, sa maraming mga bansa ay tinatawag na amides. Again, follow the lead of your instructor for the correct pronunciation that your instructor prefers. But it's a different functional group. The carbonyl next door changed the behavior of this nitrogen group, so we give it a different name. We call it an amide instead of amine. So those are some confusing functional groups. Now, let's find some functional groups in molecules. Here's in problem number 1. There is a compound, levospyroxine, used in a thyroid hormone replacement. Naglalaman ito ng isang grupo ng mga functional groups, kaya tignan natin ang mga ito. Dito sa ibaba, this is a halide, specifically an iodide. Narito ang isang oxygen na mayroong dalawang magagandang R group dito. Ito ay isang ether. Ang alcohol dito sa right, this is you could call in an alcohol. More specifically, it is an alcohol of of a benzene ring. So we call that a phenol. To be more specific, it is, I noted it's of a benzene ring. Well, there's our benzene ring. And now, let's work our way to the right of the structure. Here is a nice simple amine. At ang OH na ito ay bahagi ng isang large group. Ito ay bahagi sa tabi ng isang carbonyl. Kaya ito ay isang carboxylic acid. Kaya isang gamot, maraming iba't ibang aromatic or organic functional groups. Our second drug is a compound lisinopril. This is a drug used to treat high blood pressure. Kaya sa left, we have an OH with a carbonyl. Ito ay isang carboxylic acid. If you notice on the upper right, there is another carboxylic acid. Kaya meron tayong dalawang carboxylic acid dito. We have a benzene ring. We have this NH2. There is an amine. Kind of Latin of that A. That's an amine. Isa rin itong amine. Simple nitrogen attached to the carbon groups. And in the middle, here we have a nitrogen that is next to a carbonyl. So that is not an amine. That is an amide. So lisinopril contains a whole collection of different organic functional groups. The structure on the screen is called atorvastatin. This is a cholesterol drug. And let's start in the upper left. We have a benzene ring. This nitrogen is next to a carbonyl that makes in an amide. Narito ang carbon chain, darling of the molecule. This is an alkyl group. It's specifically, kung matututo ka ng different alkyl group, this is called an isopropyl group. We have a halide down here in the corner. This is actually specifically a fluoride. Both of these groups here are simple OH groups. They are alcohols. And then finally we have the OH next to a carbonyl, and that is a carboxylic acid. So napakaraming functional groups sa molecule na ito, and there are the names of most of them. Not quite at all, but most of them. Our fourth drug is called amlodipine. This is a high blood pressure medication. On the far left, we have the single carbon domain off. This is an alkyl group. Specifically, the one carbon group ay tinatawag na metal. This carbonyl next to an oxygen. There is no OH. That is called an ester. This nitrogen down here, not the simplest example, but this is an amine. We have a halide coming off the ring. This is specifically a chloride or a chloro group. Here is yet another ester. And here's another alkyl group. This is a 2-carbon group. It's called an ethyl group. We have this oxygen. There are no carbonyls next to it. This will be an ether. And then finally, this nitrogen on the end, this will be an amine functional group. So, kind of small molecule but lots of functionality in the molecule amlodipine. This drug is called metoprolol. Metoprolol contains the far left. This is an alkyl group. A 1-carbon alkyl group is called a methyl group. This is an oxygen attached to 2 carbon groups. That's an ether. Now, benzene ring are always easy to circle. This would be another ether. This OH is an alcohol. Here is a nitrogen. It does not have a carbonyl next to it. This is an amine. And then we saw this in a previous drug. Here's another alkyl group, and this is called an isopropyl group. So those are the main functional group in metoprolol. Problem number 6. This is omeprazole. This is a drug taken for acid reflux. I think this is a more difficult question. It's got plenty of functional groups. Just doesn't have that many different functional groups. But let's see what we can come up with. So on the far left, this is a single carbon alkyl group. This is a methyl group. This oxygen, this would represent an ether. It's attached to 2 carbon groups. Now at that point, the simple ones are kind of dried up. I mean, we have this on the right, but those are both metal groups. Here's a metal group on the end of this oxygen, this which is also an ether. So I think we need to be a little more creative here. I tell you what, there's one more easy one. You can always circle the benzene ring. Now, the one other functional group that I would point out as somewhat normal is this S double bond O, a double bond. This is called the sulfoxide. Sometimes sulfoxides are seen in solvents. That is a functional group that you may encounter in organic chemistry. But these others are a little bit harder to identify. As you get into aromatic chemistry, you will learn that this 6-membered ring kind of looks like a benzene ring. It has a nitrogen in it. This is called a pyridine ring. We also have these other nitrogen groups. These are not just simple amines because they're tied into this other benzene ring. So this is a tougher problem because there are a few different functional groups to choose from. But we can see alkyl groups and ethers, and at least a benzene ring in addition to this sort of special group, the sulfoxide. Problem number 7. This is a drug called losartan. Losartan is another high blood pressure drug. Well, start on the left. This is a halide, specifically a chloride or a chloro group. Here's a nice OH. This is an alcohol in the upper left. This long carbon chain, this is an alkyl group. This is specifically as a 4-carbon chain. It's a butyl. We have 2 benzene ring in this structure. Now, this kind of interesting nitrogen-rich structure. This has a name. I know, meron sa inyo hindi familiar dito, but this is called a tetrazole, and this appear in drugs from time to time. So there are functional groups in losartan. Last problem, number 8. This is albuterol, and in the upper left we have this OH. This is a nice alcohol. Now just below that is another OH group, but here we have the OH on benzene ring. This is an alcohol. More specifically, it is a phenolic alcohol. Here's a benzene ring right above it, but there is another OH group that's a regular alcohol. Here is a nitrogen. It's not next to a carbonyl. This is an amine. And this highly branched ring is an alkyl group. It is specifically a terbital group. It's butyl because there are 4 carbons in it. And then the third indicates how those carbons are connected to each other and branch off each other. And the third is supposed to be italicized. So those are the functional groups of albuterol.